I want to bring in now Bishop William Barber, who's the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign and author of We Are Called to Be a Movement. Bishop Barber, I'm so happy to have you with me on this Sunday morning because you and I have talked about the stark reality for the American people all across this country as 8 million people have plunged into poverty. What's your thought on the current situation, and how can we connect the humanity of what's happening with the political maneuvering in Congress?
Well, thank you so much. And here's the real deal. Let's make it even plainer. You cannot get out of this without dealing with the issue of poverty and low wealth. And I'm saying that to all of the politicians. We've got to say the way poverty ought to be the upfront issue. We already had 140 million people in poverty, 250,000 dying a year before COVID. Now we're saying 8 million more people have fallen into poverty since May. And Tiffany, here's something that is not being discussed. They were already poor. They're not falling into poverty. They're getting poor. Because, see, the government says if you make $12,800 a year as one person, you're not poor. If you make $26,400 a year, family before, you're not poor. That's not true.
Right.
Where people are poor and low wealth. So we must deal with it. We must be talking about living wages. We must be talking about guaranteed income and health care. And even this compromise. We're talking about $1.2 trillion compromise from what the Democrats propose. Well, who's going to be cutting that $1.2 trillion? And if you go down to $1.8 trillion, who's being hurt there? We need to deal with the issue of poverty and low wealth, and not just people on the street who are homeless. That's extreme, and we got to deal with that. But people who are working, people who've lost their job, who are poor and low wealth. And if we don't start dealing with this issue up front, Tiffany, we are in trouble as a nation. Trump is making it worse. McConnell is making it worse. It ought to be the focus of this next debate, is the real truth.
I appreciate the point you're making about how we define poverty, because that's very true. It's not just living what the government deems as below the poverty line, but people's everyday lives and how they're struggling and managing to make it. I really just believe the power is with the people. What's your advice to the people who are struggling? How can they encourage Congress to move? Is there anything they can do?
Well, there's a song that says, make them hear you. So here's the real thing. There's 1/3 of our electorate is now poor and low wealth people. That's why it has to be talked about. 64 million poor and low wealth people, but 34 million didn't vote last time. In 15 states, poor and low wealth people, if they vote between 1% and 19%, can change who sits in the Senate and sits in the presidency. So in the Poor People's Campaign, we're saying we have to turn that into power. We've got 3,000 people we've organized that are calling more than 2 million poor and low wealth infrequent voters in 8 states, where if just 1% to 19% of poor and low wealth people that didn't vote last time vote this time, they could change things. They must show that power at the ballot box, because that's all politicians understand. And then we must make people stop just saying middle class, wealthy class, those aspiring to get into. No, people are poor. People are low wealth. They're hurting. And that ought to be the focus of our conversation. How can you not do that when public health officials tell you that poverty and racism are the fissures in which a pandemic lives, breathes, and gets its power? We have to deal with this issue, and it's going to take poor and low wealth people, moral leaders, and advocates to force this issue into the public square. Yes, the problem is McConnell and Trump, because McConnell would rather protect companies from liability than to make sure poor and low wealth people are taken care of. But I'm also going to challenge Democrats to go right at this issue. The only place you can expand the electorate is among poor and low wealth people, black, white, brown, gay, straight, red, yellow. That's where the power is. 1/3 of the electorate is now poor and low wealth. Speak to them. They'll reward you with their votes. But if you don't, we're going to vote anyway, because it's time for a fundamental shift in conversation in this country.
I so appreciate that message, Reverend Barber. You're talking to the people who are out there struggling right now, letting them know the power is with you. You are the many and they are the few. Thank you so much for offering that beacon of hope this morning in these very dark times, Reverend Barber, and good luck to you in your continued work.